Hello and welcome to Toriono Knows Ball. Thank you guys for joining me. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy the content. Today we're going to be talking about the general manager candidates for the Jacksonville Jaguars. There are 5 finalists currently after interviewing 9 possible candidates. With the 5 finalists, we will be diving into them as they are pro personnel careers, as well as them as former players, and what they could do to become the general manager of the Jacksonville Jaguars and what it could mean for the team. So, with further ado, we're going to dive into Ian Cunningham, who is everyone's #1 candidate aside from me and a few others select on the X community. I'm excited to see if Ian Cunningham can land the job. I think he has a lot of experience, obviously, with 17 years in player personnel. He's worked for some very excellent organizations, not excluding the Chicago Bears, as they're an up-and-coming organization under Ryan Poles. And him taking the job with Ryan Poles and really flipping that Chicago Bears roster to have, competed for a potential playoff spot in the NFC in the toughest division in the NFL, in my opinion. Between that and the AFC North, I think this is, it could be a home run hit. With any hire, you have the potential of it going Ari, but I think Cunningham has the potential to be a very good GM from what I have seen. I've seen some, deep dive videos of how he scouts. I've seen, some Chicago Bears content of him and Poles traveling and scouting players, whether it be at the Senior Bowl or whether it be at their college campus during a game. He understands, person over the player. He understands, really, really getting a deep dive of how does the team respond to a player before you draft them. Paying attention to if when a guy scores a touchdown at the wide receiver position, does his team surround him and celebrate him scoring a touchdown, or do they all kind of just run to the bench and nobody celebrates with him? That defines character, even if you don't really have an understanding of who the person is. You don't really see a camaraderie with a guy. That might not be a guy that fits your culture. That might not be a guy that gets along in your locker room, or that guy might turn into a diva. He might be an excellent player, but he might be a problem 4 years from now when you want to get a contract extension. So he understands that, and notably, he and Ryan Poles passed on Jalen Carter due to the potential, arrest that would have taken place during the pre-draft process that could have put him in prison for life. And they decided to pass on him, let him slide to the Philadelphia Eagles, and he turns into an all-pro player in the NFL. So it can come back to bite you. There are certain situations where obviously you don't want to take a Henry Ruggs, even though the situation happened with him as a pro. You kind of get an understanding of who these guys are in that pre-draft process. And, if certain things are happening, you kind of want to take the person over the player. So it's a players' league, and you kind of want to get a good fit for your locker room. And I think Cunningham understands that, and he does that really well. So we'll see how he does. He is a former offensive lineman for the Virginia Cavaliers and former offensive lineman for the Kansas City Chiefs as well as an offensive tackle. He understood that he was not a good enough player to become an all-pro or a pro bowler. So he racked up his cleats and decided to go into player personnel and began as a scout, and then decided to work under some very good regimes in the Baltimore Ravens as well as the Philadelphia Eagles, who are 2 of the class acts in the NFL. So when it comes to scouting, he has gone to school under Ozzie Newsome and Howie Roseman, and now he has worked under Ryan Poles. So this is a guy that has graduated from scouting. I think he has a lot of potential as a scout in terms of being able to evaluate the draft. He was responsible for handling the board this past draft for the Chicago Bears. I think they did a really good job at landing Caleb Williams as well as Rome Odunze, and then following that up with a solid draft as well as landing a starting punter. So he understands the board. He understands how to evaluate. He understands how to evaluate the player and the person. So I think it's very important that he manages those aspects. Now, there will be a few other parts of the job that it entitles from Cunningham. But I'm excited to see if he lands the job, and I think it could be a home run. But obviously, he's not my number one choice, as I've stated. Next, we're going to move on to another big time player personnel executive in the NFL, and that's John Eric Sullivan from the Green Bay Packers. And he is currently the vice president of player personnel. He is 48 years old. If I did not mention Ian Cunningham, he is 39 years old. He is one of the younger candidates, second to Gladstone. And, we're really embracing the youth movement here in Jacksonville. But Sullivan is a more tenured player personnel executive, and he has been in the league for 23 years under Ted Thompson and Brian Gutekunst, who is the current general manager of the Green Bay Packers. He's operated as the right-hand man to Brian, and he's been noted to be the guy that convinced them to select Jordan Love. So he can evaluate quarterbacks, that's for sure. I think he would agree that Trevor Lawrence is a franchise quarterback, and I think he would be excited to work in this building and build around Trevor Lawrence. I mean, if you look at the Green Bay Packers, they know how to evaluate receivers. And I don't think we were saying that, 4 years ago, but that Packers wide receiver room is loaded. And if they were to land guys through the draft like that under John Eric Sullivan, I mean, sign me up. I'd be excited. If you could find a couple of third, fourth round studs and surround them around Brian Thomas Jr. as your number one, I'd be very excited. So John Eric Sullivan is a great option to me. Tons of experience, has worked under a great staff, and has worked for a class organization for the past 20 plus years. And he's a former player. And I mean, he's another great option to me. Just seeing the interview process for him, it's been very exciting. And he's played wide receiver as well, so he knows wide receiver. He knows the position. He played college ball at Gardner-Webb University, and also played for South Carolina. So I'm excited. I think he could be a good fit. I think he knows the offensive side of the ball for sure. So obviously he would put a big focus on surrounding Trevor Lawrence, and that's what the fans want. That's what the team wants. That's what Liam Cohen has stated he wants, to build up Trevor and to have the best possible team around him. So I think John Eric Sullivan could be a good selection as well, and he's my current number 3 with Cunningham at number 2. Next, we're going to talk about my number 1, and that is James Gladstone. He is the current Rams Director of Scouting. He is 35 years old, is a former high school offensive coordinator, so he knows offense. He has rocketed to the top of GM lists and interviews. He's interviewed for multiple other positions as well outside of the Jacksonville Jaguars, as has Cunningham, who is a big notable name. But Gladstone has spent his entire career with Los Angeles under head coach Sean McVay and general manager Les Snead. So another guy that's been in one organization in one building his entire career, but has been with a successful organization. And he began his career as a senior assistant to the general manager in 2016, and then moved to player personnel coordinator in 2018. And then in 2020, he was promoted to director of scouting and strategy. And that was as a successor to current GM of the Detroit Lions, Brad Holmes. And we all know the story with Brad Holmes. I think, grabbing a guy like this from the Rams is the exact thing that this Jacksonville Jaguars team needs. Cohen is also a graduate from the Rams, from the McVay tree. I think they would be able to mesh together really well and have the same type of philosophy. I think they would walk in lockstep and have an understanding of the type of player and the type of person they want in their locker room to fill out their 53. I think that what the Rams have done is really innovated the game, and I think they have a knack for finding the guys who know how to evaluate talent and put them in the best position to succeed. And I think Gladstone, with seeing the background footage and the behind-the-scenes footage of how the past drafts have gone for the Rams and seeing how Gladstone has contributed, I think it's phenomenal. I think he's done a great job at helping them establish a new culture after winning a Super Bowl. He was a part of that Super Bowl team in establishing that. I think this guy is the one. I mean, flat out. If you watch any Rams content, this guy is plastered all over it. If you have seen any of the scouting videos or the behind the scenes messaging about how they want to attack the draft, he is face front. He is the guy. I mean, Les Snead lets him take over the entire meeting room. Les Snead's wife is currently on Twitter advocating for this guy. Who else is Nobody else is advocating for Ian Cunningham. Nobody's advocating for John Eric Sullivan. You don't have team owners advocating for these guys. You don't have the wife of general managers advocating for these guys. James Gladstone, they are calling him a boy genius in circles. I've heard that he is the smartest guy among this bunch and the youngest. I've been utterly impressed with what has happened with the Rams over the past 4 years, and he's a big part of that. So I would like to experience that as a Jaguars fan. So that's my number one. I could go on and talk about this guy for another 10 minutes, but I want to give all the candidates a chance and give you guys a chance to hear me talk about these guys and continue to provide some analysis. And unfortunately, the next guy is going to be somebody you're probably familiar with in Ethan Waugh, who is the current assistant general manager for the Jacksonville Jaguars and the current interim GM. And he is 50 years old. He's a former defensive back, wide receiver, and quarterback. He's been an offensive coordinator at the collegiate level. He's been a quarterbacks coach. He's been a recruiting coordinator. And he's had a 20-year career in the NFL as an executive. So he's worked under the Trent Baalke tree as well as John Lynch in San Francisco. And that was where he spent a majority of his career as an executive. And thus far has spent the past 2 seasons with the Jacksonville Jaguars under Baalke. I'm not utterly impressed. I don't know how much of a hand he's played in San Francisco's success. And I don't know how much of a say he's had in Jacksonville's shortcomings. I know for me personally and a lot of other fans, we would like to rinse away the previous regime. We would like to completely move on. Obviously, you can't remove all of the scouts before the combine. You know, you can't really just completely clean house, but you can change the entire leadership. And I think with hiring Waugh, you're not necessarily moving on from the Baalke era. I think it's an extension. And if you're going to move that way, I can't say, for instance, that he has the same philosophies as Trent in terms of, valuing the measurables to an extreme that Trent did. But who's to say he doesn't? Who's to say he never agreed with Trent? Or who's to say that he did disagree with Trent and Trent never took it into account? I don't know what part he played in drafting Brian Thomas Jr. So, we don't really... This offseason has been such a plus for Jaguars fans and what the transparency looked like. We never really had that before this offseason. And you don't really know how much of a contribution Ethan Waugh had over the past 2 seasons. So it seems unfair for me to feel like he's not deserving of the position, but I don't know how to give him credit or to boost him to make an argument that he's worthy of this position. So in that instance, I don't want him. I would rather make a possible upgrade or have a change in philosophy or pick someone who's been shown to be a team builder. Like, our biggest complaint with management and the general manager position was the team building philosophy was in flux. There was no asymmetry. It was straight measurables. There was it was like they wanted guys straight out of the Army that were 6'5" plus with, 6'9" wingspans and just gotta get out there and play ball. We just want the biggest and the baddest. But there was no grit. There was no identifying the personalities. There was no identifying the real ball players. Just Grab the big guys and let's get on the field. We want to look the part. Yeah, we want to look the part here in Jacksonville, but we also want to play the part. And so I don't have a case for Ethan Waugh. He's not in my top 3. He's not in my top 4, if I'm honest. So that's my rant on Ethan Waugh. He's had an up and down career thus far, but we'll move on to the next San Francisco guy, and that is Josh Williams, who's the current director of scouting and football ops. And Josh Williams, from what I have heard, has built up a very nice career up there in San Francisco and has been with the team for 14 years. Another guy who's a long-term staple for a successful franchise. To me, his resume matches up better than Waugh's, even though he's had a bit of a shorter career and is younger. Waugh has been in the league for 20 years. Williams has only been in the league for 14 years, but there's a 13-year age gap. So there's similar experience, complete age gap, and a better understanding of scouting, as he's been a scouting assistant in 2011, a pro personnel scout in 2013, a Southeast area scout in 2017, and a national scout in 2022. If that's not a degree in scouting, I don't know what is. The 2024 season was his first year as the team's director of scouting after being promoted in March of 2024. So Williams is primarily focusing on pro and college scouting, player development, and assists with contract negotiations. Now, I will not sit here and say that the San Francisco 49ers have been the best at contract negotiations. They've been in turmoil with their wide receivers, with Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel having their fair share of drama over the past 2-3 seasons. But it is notable how they managed the cap with so many star players. And it is notable at how they are able to acquire these star players either through the draft or through trade. So if he takes part in that process, I'm impressed. And he was the area scout who first identified Deebo Samuels for the 49ers. So this is a guy who has an eye for top talent. This is a guy who can find you the ball players. So with what he's been accredited for, and I haven't seen anything major that Waugh has done or the impact that he's had or any star players that he's identified, I would rather have Williams. And that's my personal opinion. And shout out to Travis D. Holmes for having this write-up with Big Cat Country and providing me with a little bit more intel. But I would much rather have Williams. So if you were to ask me in a vacuum who my guys are, 1 through 5, it's Gladstone, it's Cunningham. At 3, I have John Eric Sullivan. At 4, I have Josh Williams. And 5, I have Ethan Waugh. So if anybody from the Jacksonville Jaguars organization cares about what the fans are saying, I hope that, you consider the top 3-4 guys. I hope Waugh is simply getting a respectable interview, but unfortunately he does not get the position. And hopefully you're able to identify who is the best guy for the team building philosophy that you want and who fits this role as the GM, who's primarily going to be the scout and decision maker from a roster building standpoint. Who's going to fit that role best? So with that being said, thank you guys for watching. This is Toriono Knows Ball. You can follow me at all socials at Toriono Knows Ball, including TikTok, X, Instagram, as well as, of course, subscribing here on YouTube. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.